Every gilded cage is built with walls of comfort. The only question is what you're paying for them.
Today, we are diving into one of the most bizarre and, honestly, controversial documents you'll probably ever hear about. It's this technical manual, a supposed top-secret blueprint for controlling an entire society. So what's inside? Let's take a look.
I mean, just think about that for a second. It sounds like something straight out of a spy movie, doesn't it? A hidden instruction book detailing exactly how a small group of elites could steer the thoughts, the actions, and the wealth of millions, all without anyone even knowing they were in a war.
And here it is. This is the document. The story goes that it was found back in 1986 by an employee at Boeing who bought a surplus IBM copier. And when they opened it up, boom, inside was this manual, laying out a whole strategy for a quiet war against the public. Okay, so what in the world is a quiet war? Well, according to this manual, it's an ongoing, undeclared battle. It's being waged by a select few against, well, everyone else, using weapons that are completely silent and invisible. The manual actually traces its own origins back to World War II military strategy. It says the whole idea started with something called Operations Research, which was a way to manage resources during wartime. That military thinking was supposedly adapted for social engineering. Then, with computers coming online and a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation, all the pieces were in place. And then, in 1954, this war was supposedly declared.
And here's the goal, right from the text itself. This isn't about tanks and armies. It's about economic conquest. The whole point, it says, is to systematically move wealth, or what it calls social energy, from the general public into the hands of a tiny ruling elite.
All right, this is where things get really, really weird. The central idea of this whole manual is that a national economy works exactly like an electronic circuit. And if you can just figure out the math, well, then you can control the whole machine.
The manual frames its entire philosophy with this quote, attributed to Rothschild. The argument is simple. Real power isn't political, it's economic. If you control the money, you control everything. So the big question then becomes, how do you model the flow of that money?
So the document starts redefining economic ideas using the language of electronics. For example, economic capacitance is just capital. You can think of it like a battery in a circuit. It's all the stored value in the system. Money, buildings, inventory, all of it. Then you've got economic inductance. This is supposed to represent the inertia of the population, their work, their habits, their services. In this model, the public is basically a predictable force that resists sudden changes. Kind of like a component in a circuit called an inductor resists a change in electrical current.
And the manual doesn't just talk about this theory, it visualizes it with these incredibly complex diagrams, just like this one. It actually treats entire industries, even households, as if they were just little components on a giant circuit board. The key thing to get here is that for the authors, this isn't some clever metaphor. It's presented as a literal, mathematical way to control society.
So, okay, if the economy is a big circuit and the public is just another component, how do you learn to control it? Well, the manual proposes a method it calls shock testing. The analogy it uses is, frankly, pretty chilling. Just like an engineer might shake an airplane to find its weak spots and breaking points, an economic engineer can apply shocks to the public to map out their behavior and find their weaknesses.
And the method is laid out in 4 basic steps. First, pick something essential, like gas. Then, you introduce a shock, jack up the price, or create a shortage. The really important part is to watch the echoes of that shock. When gas prices soar, what else do people stop buying? You use that data to build a predictive model of how society will react to things. It's kind of like a massive, crude version of the A/B testing companies use online today.
Of course, to build a model like that, you'd need data, a lot of data. The manual calls for a shocking level of surveillance, listing everything from public records to tapping phones and even analyzing people's garbage. It's about capturing pretty much every single aspect of a person's life.
So what's the point of all this data collection and shock testing? Well, the list of outputs is basically a blueprint for total social control. We're talking about controlling opportunities, controlling the media, and even creating chaos to distract everyone from what's really going on.
And this all brings us to the document's final section, and its ultimate and frankly horrifying conclusion. What is the end game of this quiet war?
Well, the main goal is to get rid of all unpredictability. The objective is to create a society that runs just like a perfectly engineered machine, completely under the control of its operators.
And to achieve that, the manual describes a very specific social structure. It says, flat out, that the lower classes must be kept ignorant, locked in their place. It literally calls this a form of slavery and says it's essential for the peace of the ruling class.
And right here, the document just lays all its cards on the table. It says that to keep the whole economic machine balanced and to deal with the irresponsible many, the only logical solutions are, in its own bone-chilling words, benevolent slavery and genocide.
So, what are we supposed to make of this? Is Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars a real leak from some shadowy group, a very clever piece of political satire, or just a paranoid fantasy? You know, regardless of where it came from, the question it leaves us with is a really powerful one. Why do these ideas about hidden control and silent wars, still have such a strong grip on our imagination today?